This Part 2 Episode 74. Eldest senior sister was only about 11 or 12 years old, but she knew about Shrek Academy. She knelt down before Ancestor Xian and begged him to avenge her. Ancestor Xian was still reeling from my parents' deaths, so he agreed to her request, and he told her that Shrek Academy would nurture her and unleash her potential. He had one condition, and that was she had to guard Shrek Academy for the rest of her life, and she had to become my bride. Eldest senior sister made the vow without hesitating at all. Bei paused for a moment and said, "I think you guys can guess what happened afterwards." Ancestor Xian avenged her, and eldest senior sister remained at the academy to cultivate as hard as she could, and managed to get where she is today. As I grew up afterwards, Ancestor Xian began to calm down, and he regretted forcing eldest senior sister to make that vow. He mentioned more than once that eldest senior sister didn't have to uphold her vow. After all, she's more than 10 years older than I am, and waiting for me isn't practical or realistic at all. However, eldest senior sister insisted on keeping her vow. She told Ancestor Xian that she would still be my bride no matter what choice I might make in the future. If I didn't like her, then she would be single for life, and she would commit her entire life to Shrek Academy so that she could repay Ancestor Xian's benevolence. Jiang Nanan's face seemed a little unfriendly as she said, "You've already had a bride since you were a child, and you still went for Xiao Ya." Bei forced a laugh and said, "But I didn't know about all that. Ancestor Xian only told me about this vow after I got together with Xiao Ya. I felt everything was just unbelievable. I was only 14 or 15 back then, and eldest senior sister was already 27 or 28, so our ages made us entirely unsuitable for each other. Furthermore, I'm sure you guys are aware of the feelings I have for Xiao Ya. All I could do was argue with Ancestor Xian, and it was then that I decided to move out of the inner courtyard. Afterwards, Ancestor Xian implicitly gave me the green light with Xiao Ya, because the academy owed the Tang sect. Ancestor Xian talked to me about this one more time before he passed away, and he asked me to be nicer to eldest senior sister if I could help it, and he said that he had let her down. I once sought her out so that we could set things straight. There were many talented suitors within the academy who had a crush on her, and I would hate to see her remain single for the rest of her life because of some outrageous vow that she made all those years ago. But eldest senior sister was extremely stubborn, and she said that I didn't have to take her, but she would never go back on her vow. She waved her sleeve and walked off after that. The truth is that even though I don't think I've done anything wrong, I still feel a little apologetic towards her. However, I have no clue what to do so that she will forego that vow. Over the years, even though Xiao Ya has never been by my side, there's no space left in my heart to accommodate anyone else. Bei's expression was a little awkward, filled with conflict and difficulty. Wang Donga asked, "Eldest senior brother, do you not feel anything at all for eldest senior sister?" Bei was exasperated. All right. Let's not talk about that anymore. But you guys can't speak a word about this to anyone, as it concerns our eldest senior sister's reputation. Tell me, Yu Hao, what plans do you have for the competition?" Hui Yu Hao answered, "I don't have an actual plan yet, but I have some ideas. This competition will have 167 participating teams, because sects are allowed to participate, and the first few rounds will be elimination rounds, all the way up till the last 32 before the group stage begins. The organization committee hasn't declared how the elimination rounds will be carried out for now. Compared to the group stages that come afterwards, we have to clear the elimination rounds before anything else. We are representing the Tang sect, so we aren't a seeded team. That also means the competition's rules won't be in our favor. We aren't sure what teams we'll run into at this point. If we encounter any formidable sects, we will be faced with quite a challenge. Therefore, we have to hide our abilities as much as possible during the elimination rounds." "Hide our abilities?" Bei was slightly taken aback. "Aren't you contradicting yourself, Yu Hao? You just talked about how important the elimination rounds are. So why should we hide our abilities?" Hui Yu Hao replied, "It's not contradictory, eldest senior brother. What I'm trying to say is, we have to hide our abilities as much as possible provided we can emerge victorious in the same round. Our appearances are quite different compared to 5 years ago, and there are so many more sects in this competition, so there won't be many who still recognize and know about us. We can put on some makeup, or something to change our appearances a little, so that the people who might recognize us from the previous tournament will no longer recognize us. At least, they won't be sure that we are who they think we are. If we don't get too unlucky, and as long as we don't meet the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy in the first rounds, it's unlikely that we'll be recognized." Bei's eyes sparkled and said, "That's a great idea. The people that will have an impression of us from the previous tournament will have been the reserve team members, who have become the main team members in this season. Everyone's become quite different after 5 years, and after we make some adjustments, and the fact that we are representing the Tang sect, will be quite effective in hiding our abilities and identities. Shusansha frowned and said, we can change our appearances, but we can't change our martial souls. How can they not recognize us once we unleash our martial souls? Hui Yuhao smiled mysteriously and said, that's what I mean when I said that we have to do all we can to hide our abilities and identities so that they can't recognize us. We can do it this way. Their discussion on battle tactics continued for a little more than 2 hours, and was concluded so that Bei Bei could get some rest. Hui Yuhao and his companions conducted a few more discussions and drills the following day, and confirmed how the starting rounds were going to be carried out. At the highest level of the Brilliant Delight Hotel, Wang Chua stood quietly on a spacious semicircular balcony, and gazed into the distance. The view was enchanting from this spot. She could see almost half of Radiant City. There were only 8 similar rooms on the Brilliant Delight Hotel's highest level. They were known as the villas in the sky, and they were exceedingly extravagant and luxurious. It was claimed that one night cost 3,000 golden soul coins, an exorbitant price. This place could be said to be the most expensive hotel on the continent. Every villa had an arched door, as if the room were a castle. There was a hall for hosting guests, a living room, a large conference room, and 20 rooms of different sizes that consisted of bedrooms, gyms, and tea rooms. There was a garden in the sky that was more than 200 square feet in surface area, and there was a swimming pool that was 20 meters on each side at the center of the villa. There was a curved dome above the greenish-blue water, and one would be able to see gentle and faint blue sparkles around the swimming pool at night. Looking up at the dome at night felt as if one was staring at the boundless starry sky, and that beauty was truly enchanting. Do you want one? Zhong Lishuan asked plainly. Wang Chua shook her head and said, I don't wish for such things to affect my mind. Zhong Lishuan sipped on the white wine in her glass. The wine was filled with a thick and rich fruity aroma that was tinged with a little sourness, and the faint taste of pickled plums lingered in her mouth. Sometimes you have to learn how to relax, you're wound up too tightly. I was like you before, but I realized afterwards that it isn't the way to go, and it would negatively affect my cultivation. You are a lot worse than I was all those years ago, your emotions are tightly wound, and extremely tense. Something is bound to go wrong if you continue like this. I'm not. Wang Chua's denial was cold and crisp. Zhong Lishuan stared at her, amused, and said, You're not. I've been there and done that, and I'm all too familiar with how you are right now. You're just like me all those years ago. Ever since you returned with Hui Yuhao, I haven't seen a smile appear on your face. You're always daydreaming when you're not pushing everyone during training. It must be because of Hui Yuhao, am I right? Wang Chua froze a little, but remained silent. She didn't attempt to argue the point. Zhong Lishuan said plainly, Do you think you stand a chance? Wang Chua still said nothing, but unwittingly clenched her fists. You have no chance, eh? I didn't expect you to be so much like me. Heh. Zhong Lishuan laughed. She seemed to be laughing happily, but tears appeared deep within her beautiful eyes. Like you? Wang Chua stared at her with a doubtful look. Zhong Lishuan smiled and said, That's right. That's because we both love someone that we can't possibly be together with. Perhaps you still have some hope, as you are quite a match for him, after all. But me, heh. She finished the wine in her glass one gulp, and began to walk back into the villa. Wang Chua watched her subtly trembling and dejected figure, and began to follow her subconsciously. Zhong Lishuan suddenly paused in her tracks. Her back was still facing Wang Chua as she asked, Tell me, Chua, do women have to rely on men for life? Wang Chua answered without hesitation, Of course not. Zhong Lishuan turned around, and her eyes became as sharp as ever. Then you have to show him that you are stronger than he is. Even if you can't obtain his love, you can't let him see how fragile you are, and you can't let him see your weak side. This is the last dignity that we can have. Wang Chua focused, and could see Zhong Lishuan's stubbornness, and even a little craziness in the middle of everything. She nodded her head forcefully and replied, Yes. The competition's rules were finally announced the following day, and every participating team received some instructions from the organization committee. Hui Yuhao couldn't help but frown when he received the instructions. The rules were indeed different, just like Elder Xian had said. According to the competition's rules, the entire competition would be split into a preliminary segment and a final segment. Teams representing sects and academies would be competing in the same pools. The Doluo continent was divided into 4 nations, the Sun Moon Empire, the Star Luo Empire, the Heavenly Soul Empire, and the Doling Empire. The only nation that possessed masses of soul engineers was the Sun Moon Empire, and this competition rule practically meant they were being openly biased. The Sun Moon Empire was being excessively dominant. Of course, the Sun Moon Empire didn't dare to be too outrageous. There were other changes to how the elimination rounds results would be calculated. Among them, the points would be allocated according to the number of people left in the team. That implied that if one party could defeat all 7 members from another party with just one of their own in the single elimination match, then they would be allocated 7 points, as their party would have 7 people left, and they wouldn't even have to go through the group battle afterward. The reason was because the group battle only gave 5 points, and there was no way the other party could turn the tables around. Of course, it was nigh impossible for one person to defeat 7 opponents in a row in a competition like this. Therefore, if the team that emerged victorious during the single elimination matches didn't obtain more than 5 points, they would have to go through the group battle, and the other side would have a chance to turn it around. Of course, minor scores were also important, and every round's accumulated points would be recorded. These minor scores would be decisive if a unique and unforeseen circumstance cropped up. For example, if there were 167 teams participating in the competition, and there were only 20 teams who made it through the single elimination rounds during the round of 32, the remaining teams that were needed to fill the slots would be chosen with their minor scores, and these accumulated scores would become even more important once they entered the round robins. The teams would be ranked according to their accumulated points during the group stage. The quarterfinals would revert to an elimination format, while these minor scores would determine the losers' rankings. The red-dressed old woman followed closely behind Xu Jiujiu. Hui Yuhao had sought out Zhong Lishuan to find out more about this old woman. It turned out that she had made a name for herself a long time ago, and people only knew that she was called Yi Man, but nobody knew her surname. Her martial soul was the Cloud Fan, and she was also the titled Doluo Star Cloud. According to Zhong Lishuan's information, the Star Cloud Doluo hadn't reached rank 95, so she wasn't a transcendent Doluo yet. Rank 95 wasn't that easy to breach, and going beyond rank 95 was a level that was far superior to the one that normal titled Doluo reached. Greetings, Princess. Please, have a seat. Hui Yuhao was sitting on his wheelchair, and he tilted his head towards Xu Jiujiu courteously. Xu Jiujiu knew that she had to be as calm as she could be in a time like this, but there was no way she could calm herself down, no matter how hard she tried. The Star Cloud Doluo had returned in the morning, and Xu Jiujiu thought she might go crazy when the field test results were reported to her. What she was feeling inside could no longer be described as astonishment, and she eagerly headed to Hui Yuhao's room immediately afterwards. Xu Jiujiu took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the emotions that were roiling in her heart, and she looked at the youth before her that could only move one arm. Hui Yuhao was all smiles, and he seemed as harmless as ever, as if he had no idea what the princess was doing here. Hui Yuhao, I'm sure you know why I'm here. Princess Jiujiu had seen and experienced many different situations after all, and she ultimately managed to force her emotions back even though she was stirred up inside. Hui Yuhao nodded, and he swiftly withdrew the smile on his face. He said angrily, you must be here because of the competition's new rules. The Sun Moon Empire is too outrageous, they didn't set a height limit for the competition. This is a rule that's almost specially created to benefit the Sun Moon Empire's sole engineers. Xu Jiujiu was slightly taken aback. What did you say? Hui Yuhao handed the instructions in his hands to her. Even though Xu Jiujiu was thinking about something else, the big competition was still extremely important, and she still had to pay attention to it. Xu Jiujiu briefly scanned the instructions and immediately understood what Hui Yuhao was trying to say. Her eyebrows locked together as she said, what do you think we should do? Composure took over the indignant look on Hui Yuhao's face. We should collectively protest against it. We've experimented with and field-tested your Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannon, and that sealed milk bottles of yours. They are very good. Do you think you can give us a discount if we purchase them in bulk? Princess Jiujiu regained her composure in an instant, and she leaned back on the sofa gracefully as she spoke. Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, I'm afraid that's not possible. Not possible. Do you know how many of these we're going to purchase? Princess Jiujiu sounded a little more high-pitched than before. Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, I don't know how many you wish to purchase, but I imagine it must be quite an amount. All I know is how much the Tang sect can produce. As of now, our Soul Tool manufacturing department is undergoing a second expansion, and much of our labor has gone toward that endeavor. Therefore, we are very limited in the amount that we can currently produce. Furthermore, even though I feel a little embarrassed to say this, I have another piece of news for you. I've just received news from the Tang sect that the price of our products might be inflated by about 30% due to resource scarcity and a lack of materials. Please forgive me, Princess. Wang Donga was behind Hui Yuhao, and she discreetly pinched him in the back. This bastard is twisting her words, and yet is making himself sound so logical, as if he's right. She was also a girl, and Wang Donga was starting to sympathize with Princess Jiujiu. Of course, she was dressed like a guy at the moment, so she couldn't express anything that resembled a girl's emotions, so she could only lower her head and force back her amusement. The star cloud Doluo immediately became a little unfriendly. She lowered her voice and said, "Do you know what you're doing? Karma will find you if you go back on your word." It was obvious that her words were hostile and threatening. Hui Yuhao heaved a faint sigh. He forced a laugh and said, "I'm so sorry, I don't wish for this to happen either. But you guys also know the Sun Moon Empire has monopolized 70% of the continent's rare metals, and they've prohibited exports. The Tang sect has just been re-established, so how can we have any channels or avenues to purchase resources and materials in bulk? Thankfully, Shrek City is developed and wealthy enough. Otherwise, we might not even be able to guarantee delivery and supply of our goods. The lack of resources and materials will undoubtedly lead to a rise in price. There's nothing I can do about that." Shu Jojo said angrily, "Enough with that nonsense. The few of you make the decisions within the Tang sect anyway. Furthermore, do you dare to claim that the Tang sect is not related to Shrek Academy in any way? How can you guys lack materials and resources with Shrek Academy redirecting resources from Shrek City? Furthermore, all you need to craft your Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannon is some relatively high-density steel." Shu Jojo was responsible for the Star Luo Empire's intelligence, so she wasn't that easy to deceive. Hui Yuhao sighed and said, "Since that's the case, then you can find out how many customers we have at the moment. Both the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Douling Empire are both important business partners for us. You're right, our Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannon's outer body only requires tough steel. But what about its formation arrays? Can we actually craft these formation arrays without rare metals?" Shu Jojo laughed coldly and said, "We can't take apart its formation arrays anyway. It will explode if we do that, so you can say whatever you want about it." Hui Yuhao frowned and said, "Princess, if you keep negotiating with me with such a rejecting attitude, I believe there's no need for us to continue this negotiation. If we want to be partners, we have to build this partnership on mutual trust and benefit as the foundations. I'm really sorry about the rise in price, but there's really nothing we can do about that. How about this, you can go back and cool off, and you can calculate how much our Zhuge Divine Crossbow Cannons and our sealed milk bottles are worth after the inflation before we continue any further negotiations." Wang Donga answered plainly, "Her name is Wang Chioa, and she's part of the team representing Shrek Academy. I believe you will meet her soon during the competition. She's your sister." It was clear that Mu Shue's eyes sparkled with curiosity and the desire for gossip. Wang Donga smiled. "Are you here today to ask me about such things?" Mu Shue froze, and she shot a faintly resentful look at her as she said, "Can we go inside now? Is Hui Yuhao around? We've already conducted experiments and field tests with the item that is given us. We're here today to talk about becoming business partners." Wang Donga opened the door and made a gesture to invite them inside. The three of them entered the room, and they ran straight into Princess Jojo, who was just standing there. Shu Jojo's eyes didn't pause on Mu Shue, and she looked beyond her at the second girl behind her. This girl was wearing a long yellow dress, and she seemed extremely gentle. Water seemed to meander within her beautiful eyes, and Shu Jojo could still feel that subtle tenderness even though she was looking her from afar. This girl was even prettier than Mu Shue. "Wei Na!" Shu Jojo exclaimed. The young girl looked at her and said, "Why are you here, Jojo?" The yellow-dressed girl's pleasant voice could be heard as she took a few steps forward. She had a look of pleasant surprise on her face. Wei Na and Mu Shue were part of the company from the Heavenly Soul Empire that Hui Yuhao and Wang Donga had run into when they were inside the Great Star Do Forest. The middle-aged man that had accompanied them here today was Mo Feiyun, the same man that led the group back then. Hui Yuhao turned his wheelchair with one hand, and he smiled at Mo Feiyun. "Greetings, Uncle Mo. It's been a while." Mo Feiyun was astonished when he saw the state that Hui Yuhao was in. "Yuhao, you." Hui Yuhao forced a laugh and said, "I was in an accident. I can only move this arm at the moment." He moved his right arm as he spoke. Mu Shue and Wei Na looked over when they overheard Hui Yuhao and Mo Feiyun's conversation. Mu Shue was also momentarily stunned when she saw Hui Yuhao sitting in a wheelchair. What happened to you? Why are you like that?" It wasn't too long ago that she had met Hui Yuhao and Wang Chioa. She had never expected that this energetic and fearsome youth from before would be a cripple when they met again. Hui Yuhao laughed mockingly at himself. "Perhaps this is my punishment for trespassing over the airspace of the Heavenly Soul Empire's capital city. Greetings, Mu Shue." "Hello, Wei Na." Two different female voices could be heard exclaiming at the same time. Wang Donga wasn't one of them. The voices belonged to Mu Shue and Princess Jojo. Urgency and hastiness returned to Shu Jojo's eyes, while Mu Shue's eyes flowed with vigilance and wariness. Wang Donga was smiling to one side, and her smile was a little strange and sinister. However, nobody else, but Hu Yuhao paid any attention to her. Hu Yuhao said exasperatedly, "Please, everyone. I'm just a cripple." Mu Shui grunted and said, "It doesn't matter, I have to be present. I'll accompany Wei Na for the negotiations, and then I'll send you back." Xu Jiuzhou's face turned black as she said, "No way. Can't you see that we're discussing official business? I should have priority since I came here first." Mu Shui glanced at her and said, "You must be the Star Luo Empire's Princess Jiuzhou. If I'm not wrong, you were just about to leave when we arrived. This means that your negotiations are over, and it's our turn now." The two girls stared into each other's eyes, and intense sparks seemed to fly. Wei Na glanced at Hu Yuhao rather apologetically, and then she turned towards Xu Jiuzhou. Xu Jiuzhou suddenly turned her gaze to Hu Yuhao. "Tell me, what do we do?" Hu Yuhao looked at both parties, and everyone's attention was drawn to him. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I'll need everyone to suffer here in my humble abode for a while. I'm clear on your goals. Let's do it this way. Since both parties representing the Star Luo Empire and Heavenly Soul Empire are here, we'll carry out an open discussion. Both of you are Tang sect clients, and we'll do our best to be fair. What do the two of you think?" "Wait a minute." Xu Jiuzhou interrupted Hu Yuhao suddenly. At such a timing, she revealed her strong character. "Hu Yuhao, let's follow the price that we agreed on earlier. However, we'll need to take priority. I won't bargain with you either, but this sum of money is too astronomical. If you need it, we can make an exchange with some rare metals totaling to the same value." Hu Yuhao's eyes brightened. To him, rare metals were better than gold soul coins. What he said before wasn't a lie. More than 70% of the rare metals in the continent had been taken by the Sun Moon Empire and stored for potential use in a war. Even the illustrious Virtue Hall had to seek approval from the imperial family and military if they wanted to use some for research. If the Star Luo Empire could retrieve some rare metals to exchange for the cannons, it would undoubtedly be great for the future development of the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall. However, Hu Yuhao didn't rush to agree at this moment. After everything that he had been through, his mindset had transformed greatly. He was calmer in dealing with things. "Priority. Sister Jiuzhou." Wei Na called softly. Xu Jiuzhou gritted her teeth. In terms of wealth, the Star Luo Empire wasn't inferior to the Heavenly Soul Empire. However, would the increase in bids stop if they continued like this? After the experiments, she was determined to get these two soul tools that could greatly increase the fighting strength of the Empire's military. What should she do? This was a question that popped up in Xu Jiuzhou's head. HMPH. A cold snort caused the temperature in the room to dip. A strong aura spread from the star cloud Doluo Yi Man and suppressed the people from the Heavenly Soul Empire. Mo Feiyan, who was standing at the front, subconsciously retreated and unleashed his soul rings as he was pressured. Even though Mo Feiyan was already an 8-ringed soul Doluo, his face still turned serious against a titled Doluo. Princess Jiuzhou was shocked too. Just as she was about to stop the star cloud Doluo, a cold aura spread from Wei Na's body. The temperature in the entire room dipped significantly, and a majestic aura surged. The star cloud Doluo's expression changed, and she quickly blocked Princess Jiuzhou. There was one more person beside Wei Na. This person's body was engulfed by a deep blue cloak, and thus it was difficult to see what she looked like. However, it was possible to tell that she was a lady. The aura came from her body. It swallowed the aura that the star cloud Doluo unleashed. How strong was it? Transcendent Doluo. Man Yi's expression turned dismal. Even she didn't realize when this person had entered the room. This showed that there was a gap in their cultivations. This gap also signified that she couldn't challenge this person. There was only one possibility, that person was a transcendent Doluo. As Wei Na lifted her right hand, the aura retracted and she sighed. "Sister Jiuzhou, do we have to do this? We shouldn't be opponents." Xu Jiuzhou also sighed and said, "We were reckless. I apologize." "All right, I'll follow your raise. We'll add 10% to our bid too." "Ladies, please don't do this." Hu Yuhao suddenly made his move. The two ladies looked at him at the same time. They didn't appear very friendly as they looked at him. Adding another 10% to their bids made the price of the soul tools even more costly. Whichever empire purchased the soul tools would experience a fall in their wealth. "Ladies, please hear me out," Hu Yuhao said. "I don't need either of you to raise the price." Hu Yuhao's words dissolved some of the enmity between the two ladies. The Tang sect requires money and resources to grow. We don't belong to any empire, but we don't want lives to be lost because of a war. We are also part of the continent, and we have a common enemy. I hope that our appearance can help the Star Luo, Heavenly Soul and Doling empires, and not cause a rift. That's why we won't raise the price of the soul tools to increase the burden on any empire. Let's sign a contract then. Shujojo knew exactly not to take things as they were. Wei Na's actions earlier had already put her on alert. They took some time to discuss the details of the contact before they finished, which took around 2 hours. One of the most important clauses was that the Star Luo and Heavenly Soul empires couldn't contact the Tang sect privately and go against the contract. Whenever either party purchased soul tools from Tang sect, they had to inform the other party. The Tang sect also had to prioritize both empires whenever they were selling new types of soul tools. If the Tang sect could produce a sufficient number of Zhuge divine crossbow cannons and sealed milk bottles, they had to supply both empires as best they could. When the room was finally quiet again, Hu Yuhao's eyes were already filled with fatigue. Wang Donga carried him to his bed and gave him a simple massage. I'd rather compete and face a strong opponent than negotiate with them, Wang Donga sighed. You must be very tired, Yuhao. Hu Yuhao nodded lightly and said, this is what the Tang sect has to go through in order to develop. Not only have we received our most important order, but we have also developed a greater understanding of the management of both empires at the highest level. Wang Donga lowered her voice and said, do you know what Princess Jojo referred to when she mentioned the strength of the Sun Moon Empire? Hu Yuhao lowered slightly and said, I can roughly guess. It should be the advanced level soul engineers and soul tools. Truly strong soul tools will not be given to the soul engineering teams. Although Shujojo didn't mention it, I can tell from her expression that it's something scary. Wang Donga nodded and revealed a lost look. She said, Yuhao, do you think a war is really coming? What should we do then? Hu Yuhao squinted and said, we can't avoid a war. I only want to protect the people around me. If my body has recovered by the time the war starts, then I will, morning. As the first ray of sunlight shone from the east, the streets of Radiant City were already greeted with a weird scene. Soldiers clad in silver armor stood in 2 long parallel rows. They extended from the doors of the Mingyu Hotel all the way to an unknown destination. The path they formed was also restricted from public access, and everyone was asked to stay 30 meters away from this path. Radiant City could hold more people than Star Luo City, so the Empire had activated a large portion of its military to maintain order. This arrangement alone required more than 20,000 soldiers. There was a very austere aura in the air of the streets. Everyone from the Tang sect had already prepared in the morning. Bei Bei was in better shape, but he still couldn't walk. He didn't have too many instructions regarding today's competition. However, Hu Yuhao still went to his room in the early morning. Eldest senior, are you feeling better? Hu Yuhao asked the pale-looking Bei Bei. Oh, I'm much better. With my healing speed, I should be able to compete in 10 days. Bei Bei smiled as he spoke. He had already regained his elegant composure. Hu Yuhao said, we are going to compete. Eldest senior, do you have any instructions for us? Bei Bei shook his head and said, what's there to instruct? I believe in all of you. Go. This time, we are fighting for the Tang sect's glory and ourselves. While we are still young, it's time for us to shine. I'm waiting for all of you to return victorious. Definitely. Hu Yuhao nodded forcefully. With Wang Donga's help, everyone from Tang sect put on some light makeup. This didn't change their appearance too much. However, there were slight changes to everyone's facial features, even on closer observation. Along with their own development, it was difficult for others to tell that they were the Shrek's 7 monsters that had once created miracles in the last tournament. Of course, this would only last until they demonstrated their powers in this tournament. After all, they couldn't conceal their martial souls. Hu Yuhao still wanted Ji Juechen, Jing Ziyan, and Nana to stay and take care of Bei Bei. However, Bei Bei didn't let him do so. No one wanted to miss such a great event. As Ji Juechen and Jing Ziyan were already more than 20, they could only tag along as teachers. Everyone from the Tang sect changed into the same warrior robes. Their warrior robes were specially designed. There were silver embroidered lines on their white warrior robes, and these lines eventually gathered at the back, forming the words Tang sect. Although there was a 30 meters restriction on the public, there were still many people who gathered to watch the competing teams as they exited the hotel. When the Tang sect team appeared, they immediately caused a huge uproar. Hey, look at this. This team is so weird. Why is there someone in a wheelchair? Is he allowed to compete in a wheelchair? Tang sect. It seems like a sect. Has anyone heard of them before? The tournament venue was on the outskirts of the city. Once they passed the buildings in the city, they could see it from afar. Right now, the area was crowded with people, with more than 30,000 soldiers maintaining order. The crowd was divided into different regions, segregated from the grandeur of the main arena. To the north, there was a high platform made that looked like it could accommodate 1,000 people. The platform was more than 10 meters high, and more than 100 meters across. The wide platform shone with a silvery white glow, and appeared to be made from metal. Even though it was just a platform, it was an extremely huge one. There weren't any seams or breaks in it at all. The weird thing was that there seemed to be a groove around the platform. There was a transparent barrier stained with dim yellow that rose into the sky coming out of that groove. The ends of the barrier couldn't be seen. How high did one's soul power have to be to support this barrier? Furthermore, it was possible to tell this was different from the last tournament. At least, no one could be struck off the stage and end up as a loser so easily. One had to completely defeat their opponent to win. Beside the platform, there were huge soul screens extending 100 meters from the center of the tournament stage. These soul screens were held in the air by tall scaffolding, and every screen was more than 20 square meters in size. Only the Sun Moon Empire possessed such soul tool techniques. There were more than 100 such screens set up around the tournament stage. The resting area was on the east side of the stage, and was divided into 2 regions. The region closer to the stage was a pergola, and could hold close to 20 teams. The rest were just chairs that weren't shaded. These chairs were lined up in a row to the sides of the pergola, slightly behind it. From how the Sun Moon Empire hosted this tournament, their attention to detail reflected their superiority. The resting area with the pergola was undoubtedly left for the more prestigious academies and sects. After registering at the registration point and providing the administrative details for the tournament, the Tang sect team was led to a region with all wooden benches. It was even in a dilapidated corner. Everyone from the Tang sect looked very gloomy upon being awarded such poor treatment. Xiao Xiao and Jiang Nan Nan were also furious. This is too much. Xiao Xiao hissed furiously. He Kai-Tu comforted her by patting her shoulders and smiled, but he didn't say anything. Hu Yuhao smiled and said, "This is nothing much. I'll use my abilities to tell them that they are wrong. That'll be enough, right?" The sun had already risen at this point. As rays of sunlight shone on everyone from the east, every competitor seemed to be layered with gold. There were simply too many competing teams, and it took a whole hour for every team to settle down. The rapturous cheers from the public could also be heard in the distance. Hu Yuhao was jolted suddenly, and turned in a certain direction. It was an extremely mysterious team. Zhong Peng was leading them, and there was a group of people behind him. They were all in black warrior robes, and wore headdresses with veils. These veils concealed their appearances. There was a lady with an excellent figure behind Zhong Peng. A weird aura was coming from her that seemed as if it were drawing all light towards her. When Hu Yuhao's spiritual power got close to her, it was distorted and unable to get within a foot of her. Naturally, he couldn't use his spiritual detection on her. Tang Yue was following behind this lady. Even though Tang Yue was wearing a veil, Hu Yuhao could still tell that it was her. The Holy Ghost Church. Hu Yuhao squinted. It was indeed them. The Holy Ghost Church was here to compete. "Teacher Xiao Yue, what should I do if I meet you in the tournament?" He Kai-Tu told everyone, Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Division. This is one of the true core strengths of the Sun Moon Empire. Oh? How many of them are there, second senior? Hu Yuhao suddenly recalled what his and He Kai-Tu's identities were. He looked over towards He Kai-Tu. He Kai-Tu was also looking back at him. He didn't seem as simple as before anymore. His eyes were flashing with a radiant glow. There are only 1,000 people in the division. Half of them are here now. They are all at least Class 5 Soul Engineers, equipped with the best soul tools. Their leader is a Class 9 Soul Engineer, and only accepts orders from the Emperor himself. They are the trump card of all trump cards. Their importance to the Imperial family is only inferior to the Imperial Shrine. Isn't the Emperor seriously ill? Has he recovered? Hu Yuhao was stunned. At this point, a group of people arrived. They were escorted by the Soul Engineering Division on chariots and horses to the main stage. There was a small Imperial chariot pulled by 32 horses. There were also many guards and officials decked in luxurious courtwear behind this chariot. The chariot stopped in front of the main stage. 2 maids pulled open curtains embroidered with silver lotuses, and a wheelchair was pushed out. There was a handsome youth in the wheelchair. It's him. Hu Yuhao was stunned to see that it wasn't the Emperor coming out from the chariot. It was the Crown Prince, Xu Qianran. Only the Emperor could sit in such a chariot. Since Xu Qianran dared to sit in this chariot, everyone knew what it signified. Following this, Hu Yuhao focused his attention again. He saw that the person pushing the wheelchair was Juzi. Juzi was still as beautiful as ever, her complexion even more delicate now. Compared to before, her beautiful eyes had a more dignified look, and she was extremely elegant, like a queen. There was one person walking beside Zhu Zi. Jing Hongchen. He was an extremely powerful Class 9 Soul Engineer, who held a respected status in the Sun Moon Empire. Greetings to Prince Regent and Regentess. Aside from the Soul Engineering Division, all the officials present knelt down and greeted Xu Qianran. Regent. It seemed like the Sun Moon Empire's emperor wasn't dead yet. Regentess. Zhu Zi, she actually. Indescribable emotions filled Hui Yuhao's heart and made him short of breath. She has married him and become his legitimate wife. Zhu Zi, why are you doing this just for revenge? A smooth and delicate hand reached out for Hui Yuhao's shoulder. Hui Yuhao turned around and saw Wang Dong's clear, powdery blue eyes. I'm fine. Hui Yuhao gently shook his head. Zhu Zi pushed Xu Qianran to the center of the main stage. She didn't sit down, but stood beside him. Since she didn't sit, the officials who were panting after climbing the stairs also didn't dare to sit, and could only remain standing. Xu Qianran nodded at Zhu Zi, who then slowly walked forward to a sound-amplifying soul tool. Her moving voice soon rang out to everyone. Silence. A low voice sounded, and a strong suppression filled the entire place. After the voice sounded, everyone felt that everything in front of them had turned dark. Even their breathing sped up. Any commotions disappeared after it spoke. The entire tournament venue turned silent instantly, to the point where even a dropped pin would ring out. What abilities did she have? How was she able to exert such terrifying suppression? She had used her own strength to terrorize more than 100,000 people. Was this really achievable by a soul master? Hui Yuhao was horrified, and he blurted out almost instantly, Darkness Holy Dragon, Dragon Emperor Doluo Long Xiaoyao. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.